It's WPIAL Basketball Championship Weekend at the Peterson Event Center. Hi, I'm Kevin Gorman, the Trib columnist, joined by Trib's lead high school writer, Chris Harlan, to talk a little WPIAL basketball. And Chris, this is always one of the most exciting weekends of the year. I'm not a huge fan of the games being played at Peterson Event Center, just for the atmosphere that it kind of lacks, I guess, with the Oakland Zoo seats being pushed back and everybody being so far away from the floor. But I think the excitement this year has been on the basketball court. When you look at these playoffs, and I know you had the chore of having to do some pre-tournament predictions, but when you look at the playoffs and you see three number 4 seeds in the championship game, a number 7 seed, a number 2 seed, a couple number 2 seeds, I believe. Yeah. You know, you start looking at these brackets and saying, what in the heck happened here? But, you know, Tuesday night was one of the wildest nights and that I can remember. One night, WPIAL basketball championships of the semifinal round, 4 boys games decided by 7 points. 2 number 1 seeds lose in overtime. A third number 1 seed loses in overtime on Wednesday. One of the games involved a 21-point comeback. I mean, this was the craziest boys basketball bracket I remember in a long time.
Yeah, it was. And I think we kind of saw that coming into the playoffs, especially in Quad A when you looked at it. And there were 7 or 8 teams that I think you could have said could win this title. But there was really no one team that you could point to and say that they were better than everybody else. And I think that kind of transferred over to some of the other classes too. I think with AAA, Newcastle was the number 1 seed. They were good all year, but they were a good team that kept winning. But you looked at them, and they weren't a dominant team. They were a bunch of 6-foot kids who played really hard.
Yeah, and Ralph Blundo, when he was on here a few weeks ago, kind of warned us. He said, hey, right, these guys deserve everything they've been given in terms of credit, but let's not compare them to our all-time great teams because they're not that. Right. This is a team that is, to some degree, as he warned, was overachieving.
So really, AA is the only one with Aliquip and Lincoln Park that kind of held true. I mean, you got the 1 and the 2 seed, and those are the kind of the 2 teams all year we kind of looked at and said those are probably the 2 best teams in AA. But when you look at the other ones, I mean, the team that's surprising, I think, is that Monessen isn't here, because in Single A they were the team that was dominant all year. And if you were going to pick one team and say they're going to be in the championship, I think most people probably would have picked Monessen.
I think Monessen would have been the one given out of the entire tournament bracket with as many schools there were. And I can't even say how many teams there were because there were some play-in games, I believe. So, this is beyond 64 teams. Yeah. I thought Monessen was the one team that was going to end up in the championship game. So you have to tip your hat to Cardinal Ward North Catholic for that overtime victory where, of all people, Eric Taylor, their 6'4", 250-pound center, hits a 3-pointer, and then they have a big game-winning shot there as well. But you covered a couple of these games. I wanted to ask you about the one game that you covered in particular, and that was Mars Beaver Falls.
And it lived up to what we thought it was going to be. I mean, 2 really good teams, and took it down to the wire. And terribly, it came down to a missed free throw by Robbie Carmody at the end. He had to he got fouled, made a great play to get down there, draw the foul, went to the foul line with 1.7 seconds left, got the first, didn't get the second. But it kind of, it was tough to see for a Mars team that had been down by 13 points, and it just rallied back. I mean, you thought a few minutes earlier, even 5 minutes earlier, Mars looked like they were out of it. And they came back and hit some amazing threes, got some turnovers, and then Beaver Falls missed a couple late free throws, and Carmody gets the rebound and drives down and gets a foul. So just to be in that situation to try to get those free throws was an amazing rally for Mars. But it lived up. I mean, you looked at those 2 teams, and they were good. I mean, they were as good as anything you saw this year.
I almost would say that they were the 2 teams, just in terms of pure matchup, that would have made maybe the best WPIAL championship game in that classification. That's to take nothing away from Newcastle, which beat Beaver Falls twice and certainly earned that number 1 seed, going undefeated in the regular season, aside from the loss to Alderdice, which was non-conference. But in terms of matchups, that's the game you wanted to see, that you had John Costello matching up against Creech and Jeter, that you had the bigs in there, that you had a Carmody, an athletic guy, matching up against some of the athletic guys on Beaver Falls. And I thought that was one, neither team's strength was really in the backcourt. It was more in the front court. That those were 2 teams that, very much like the Indiana Beaver Falls championship game a year ago, that was one that would have probably made for a great final.